السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم واجعلنا منهم آمين. الحمد لله على نعمة الإسلام وكفى بها نعمة. Inshallah, this evening I want to discuss the election in New York and give reflection on it, and then talk about in general the changing of the landscape in America, and at the end a brief update on Gaza, the latest on Gaza. To start with, the earthquake in New York last week on Tuesday was way beyond anybody had imagined as of 2 years ago, not to mention going back. And basically, the fact that a Muslim who stand and said, I am a Muslim, I'm not going to compromise on my identity, and keep repeating it in different venues in this regard, and to be able to win more than 50% of the vote in New York as the mayor, as the next mayor or mayor-elect, the city that has more Jews than any city in the world, including Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And the other shock is that 30% or 33%, what have you, of the Jews have voted for him. Now, why do I bring this part? I'm going to give you a quick background, inshallah. During the primaries for electing or selecting, I should say, a representative to run as the Democratic mayor for New York versus the Republican candidate, there were about 10 of them. And in one of the first famous debates, it was in the background that this person have talked about the IDF having some luck on the New York police. IDF is the Israeli army. And he have talked about the genocide in Gaza. He have talked about arresting Netanyahu if he comes to New York City because of the ICC decision. He said, I will implement it. And discussing issues that basically pertaining to the needs of everyday citizen in New York. So in the beginning, everyone was asked during a debate of where you're going to go, which country you're going to visit, what's the first country you will visit when you become, if you become a mayor. And you hear Israel, Israel, the Holy Land, Israel, except when it came to him, he said, I'm not traveling anywhere, I'll be in New York. So that was really a first public stand in front of the cameras and in front of, TVs and many people that showed, oh, this is a different type of candidate. Not just he's saying, I am a Muslim, but he's speaking his mind, and he's expressing the facts as he sees it versus all this crowd that are there. Now, the rest of the crowd that was running, basically, they really did not have much of a chance, except two individuals. One is Cuomo, who was the governor of New York, and the other one is Adams, who was the mayor of New York. Now, Adams and Cuomo are very well known publicly that they are very corrupted. In fact, Adams was indicted and he had to seek Trump's pardoning him so he will not go to jail. Of course, he promised to help ICE in New York as a result. Cuomo is a womanizer. There are at least 14 women who he tried to, use them sexually by harassing them, sexual harassment, and maybe beyond. This is the ones that we know. But he still have the guts to come and run for a public office in New York after all those scandals. And the shock of the primaries, when we say the primaries, it's between the Democratic candidates themselves, was that Mandani have won the primaries. And alarm start going in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and among the Zionist circles in America and beyond. Is this possible? How this could be? How somebody who have making all these stands against the Zionist entity is a viable candidate? How? And he will win, the primaries. How? I mean, it's only before October 7 that if you would utter, as a politician, words against AIPAC or against the Zionists in Palestine, against supporting the Zionists with taxpayers' money, against this, you are considered, somebody, an outcast who have no chance of reaching, an office in a place like New York City, not to mention other places. So that was the first shock to them, that this guy was able to make it. Now come for the rescue is those billionaires who convince Cuomo, you need to run as independent because we need to defeat this guy at any price. We have to defeat this Mandani. Come to the act also, Adam said, I'm going to run too. And as many of you know, if you get a candidate representing the Democratic Party, the party should be just behind him and he will be the only one. But in this case, the two candidates, major candidates, came and said, we're going to run as independent. And money start pouring to Adams and to the former government Cuomo. And then there was a talk that we need to convince Adams to quit the race. And we need to convince even the Republican candidate who have no chance. I mean, everyone knew that the Republican candidate have zero chance of becoming a mayor. So they said we need to convince this guy to quit the race. Adams, I'm not sure at what price, agreed and quit. But Slewa, who's representing the Republican Party, refused. He said later on he was offered $20 million to step aside. Because there are people in this country, many of them are Zionist supporters, who think they can buy people. Yeah, we have billions. I'm a billionaire. We are billionaires. We can buy people. He refused. So it became between Mandani, Cuomo, and Slewa in this regard. And millions start coming in to Cuomo from one of the Zionists, major Zionists in the U.S., Ackman. You have Lauder, who set on an empire of, women fragrance and this and that. You have the Bloomberg. You have, people giving $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million in this regard because they were determined we have to defeat this guy. By now, of course, you know the results. You know the results. More than 2 million people came to elect the mayor, which did not happen since 1969, those numbers, in terms of, the population. And more than 1 million voters voted for Mamdani, meaning that Slewa plus Como, both of them got less than what Mamdani have got. And again, that was really shockwaves that came to the establishment, those billionaires. Even a few days before the election, many of those from the establishment of Democrats, they did not even support Mamdani. Hakeem Jeffrey, who is the minority leader in the Congress, he came a few days before that, as they said, على استحياء, with little shyness to come and support him. As the Quran says, على استحياء. But Schumer, who is the minority leader in the Senate, did not. Until the last minute, he did not say anything in support of Mamdani. Even after the election, they asked him, who did you vote for? And he would not even say it in this regard. President Trump came 2-3 days before the election and said, the Republican candidate have no chance, so we need to stop Mamdani. If Mamdani win, I'm going to cut the funding from New York City. And he encouraged all his supporters to go behind Como. Not just that, he went to New Jersey, not physically, talk to the Jewish, the Haredim in New Jersey, and there are many of them, telling them to elect the Republican governor. The election, in fact, was a big defeat for the Republicans on that night because the Democrats got the mayorship of New York, the governorship of Virginia, the governorship of New Jersey, and Sister Ghazala got to be the lieutenant governor in Virginia, a first Muslim, male or female in this regard, the first Muslim, to be elected to a state-wise position in the government in Virginia. After that, we start seeing different tones. So you get this Ackman, as I said, he's one of the worst Zionists in this regard, coming and said, oh, we can work together with Mamdani. Okay, now because his money is at risk, because there's this issue, we need to tax the rich and get some benefit to the ordinary person in New York in terms of, transportation. He offered free buses, fast buses, and freezing rent, and so on and so forth. So those billionaires start thinking about, we need to block his agenda or try to convince him to compromise on certain things. Now, if you read the Israeli media, you get the impression that there will be an exodus of Jews from New York. Now, even this thing was also before the election. Oh, all the Jews would live in New York. All the people would live in New York. All the capital would live in New York. They called him Hamas. They called him jihadi. Those are Zionist circles and beyond. They called him communist, socialist. But this Hamas and jihadi, of course, to give this Islamic angle And others went beyond as if, you know, he was associated with Hamas and Hamas and Hamas and Hamas and that. You just get lost of what he's accused of being. Despite all of this, he had more than 50% of the vote. I mean, that's something that outstanding in New York when you have candidates who are well known, but the people knew their corruption. So one of the signs that we have seen of the changes that we will discuss in the landscape is it's becoming okay in America to say, I'm not going to take AIPAC money. I'm going to return AIPAC money. This is the Israeli PAC that has been threatening people left and right if they do not support Israel and sending arms to Israel and giving money to Israel all those years. From the time that they have defeated Charles Percy in the old days for starting just to be fair to the issue of the Palestine, they get together, put so much money and defeat him in the 80s to teach everybody a lesson. Now, even some of the candidates said, I will not take Jewish money, which is really a step way beyond what we would have dreamed before October 7th. I mean, I will testify that Mamdani is in this race, won the race because of October 7th. Without October 7th, some of his statements will absolutely disqualify him in New York in the population. But October 7 have turned things upside down in this country with the efforts of many active Muslims and non-Muslims that started at the universities, Ivy Leagues, and beyond. Now, mayors do not really run foreign policy. They do not run foreign policy. I mean, they care about, you know, permit building, highways, that is, you know, with government funding and support. They care about streets and garbage collection and Medicaid and what have you. I mean, those are the issues. But this election, it looks like as if it is a matter that pertaining to the wood. Because one of the things in this country, it became clear in the last 20 years that people who are in office start having effect and implication on policy outside of the country. I mean, just look at some of the statements from, you know, Ilham Omar or Rashida Tlaib or that. I mean, you could see the waves being in Congress and saying certain things, the waves that are being created by such a statement, and then they need to be censored and this and that. Now, those what those guys, you know, women were saying, now we have Representative Green is saying even further than that, and saying that and criticizing the AIPAC and their money and their influence in the U.S. in this regard. This is something new. And this is something monumental. This is not something, you know, that you can say, well, it's a passing phenomenon. Today, if you go to any Israeli media, today, talking about today, in every newspaper that you would go, website in English, of course, I do not know Hebrew, they talk about this effort lately that the Israeli government have put tons of money in the past few days with organizations in the US and individuals. Among them is a former campaign manager for Trump, to brighten the image of the Zionist entity in America, especially among the people on the right. I mean, Trump himself said 2 or 3 weeks ago in public, I mean, this is in public, that It was not in a private setting to be published. He said Israel used to control the Congress, they no longer control it. Because Trump and his people are determined that no country, no outside country will have influence, direct or indirect influence on the US government. That at the end of the day, it's US interests that will be first. Of course, there will be still deals and there will be still things behind closed doors that would happen, and some favorism here and there. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Just look at the relationship now between Trump and Erdogan. And we'll discuss this, at the end with Gaza. I mean, this is what's upsetting the Zionists in Palestine and the Israeli government and their supporters in Washington, D.C. In the old days, they will just come to the AIPAC, will come to every senator and congressman and said, we are the ones who paid for you to be here. We need your vote, and they will give them statements to make. I mean, sometimes you will see congressmen, senators making the same statements, and you wonder, is it a coincidence? No, it's written by those Zionists. But this is changing. Now, what is changing? What is changing? There's a change in the White House itself. There's a change in the different departments of the government. There's a change within the army and the armed forces establishment. There's a change in universities. There's a change in companies, big companies, change among billionaires. If you just compare the last 2 years of Biden and what's going on now, you're going to see a tremendous, big change in the way that this country is being run. And it's only have been, 10 months since Trump came to be the president. For example, just go to the White House in the past 12, 13, 14 years and beyond, and you will see a good number of Jews in the White House running departments, not this administration. There's an advisor, Miller, there is the most influential, but he's an advisor who writes speeches. And he's really sick. Although he's a son of immigrants, he is the architect of separation of families from their kids in the borders, of putting them separate, and some of them got lost. This guy is really sick. You do not know what really formed his thinking in this regard. He put it in being anti-immigration and anti-immigrants. Although him being a Jewish, we really do not see his influence when it comes to foreign policy. He's not dealing with that. Yes, there is, Witkoff and Kushner dealing as representative of the White House in the issue of Gaza. But they were chosen because Trump knows that they can squeeze Netanyahu and company. They are Jewish, they are very rich, they have interests in the Arab countries and the Gulf. That's where their money is, and investments and this and that. So he realized that those are the guys who are able, not your typical diplomat, like, Secretary of State or somebody in the State Department or what have you. So now you have this Rubio coming, Secretary of State, and saying the Israelis need to follow and be sure that this agreement that was ceasefire in Gaza, that it is working. We will not allow them to destroy what we have built. Wow. Just go back a few months back before the presidential election in this country and see what Rubio was saying. Well, not just that. Lindsey Graham. I mean, you should read what Lindsey Graham used to say in the media about Palestine, about Gaza, about Islam and Muslims. I mean, cannot be more pathetic than this. Now, Lindsey Graham is coming and saying, we have to have two-state solution. The Palestinians have to have state of their own. I mean, wow. I mean, if you do not know how this person was, you are not going to appreciate what's the change. I mean, 180 degrees. And he's talking, him and Trump and others, about the image of Israel in America. It's being tarnished. I mean, we have seen a tremendous change on the right from before October 7. Now we have voices from Bannon to Carlson to Green to the Heritage Foundation and others. They are taking stands that are shocking to the Zionists. I mean, for Green, who was the supporter of Israel and one of the tools of the AIPAC with AIPAC money, to introduce a resolution to cut $500 million from assistance to Israel, I mean, that's way out of what anybody have expected. And we have seen in the previous administration that any official or even part of a campaign who would say something that, quote unquote, offend the Zionists, he's out, she's out. I mean, some of you remember my own cousin, Linda Sarsour, was kicked out of the campaign for Biden because she said something about Israel. I mean, she was in the campaign because basically they were counting to get the Arab and Muslim vote and what have you with those Democrats. And Sanders is the one who brought her. She mentioned something, I mean, we are not talking about something very drastic. Biden said out. But now compare with the Republicans. So Musk got one of the guys to work for him in Dodge, and this young man have put statements on the social media which were anti-Semitic. He was on the verge of resigning when the Jews, objected to his appointment. Who came to his defense? J.D. Vance. He said he's going to stay in his place. Hexet, the Secretary of Defense, now it's called the Secretary of War, right? So he appointed a spokesman, a spokeswoman, who also have many anti-Semitic posts. And the Jews came and their supporters, this is how you could put her. He said, calm down, she's there to stay. This is new. Now, the Heritage Foundation have put together this Project 2025, which we discussed in one of the sessions that Dr. Hassan Baloch, discussed, which is basically using the tools in the hands of the White House and the government to change the landscape, to push the narratives on the right. So using government departments to do this change was one of the main tasks that they came. Similarly, cutting assistance, the money that goes to the needy, to the poor, to education, and basically leave the people to themselves, and it's this capitalist agenda supporting the rich with, tax cuts. I mean, we have seen government has been closed for 40 days because the Republicans want to cut subsidies to Obamacare. I mean, they hate the name Obamacare. They want to cut subsidies. So basically, you were paying $200 a month. Now you'll be paying $500 a month or $600. Not sure still what's the agreement that was done tonight to open the government tomorrow. That's what President Trump announced this evening, that it's going to open, and then CNN said there's an agreement. So they're going to open the government. We yet need to see the details. But for 40 days, they refuse to allow the subsidies to continue, even for 1 year. Because that's the philosophy of the capitalist. This is what the Heritage Foundation have pushed. Changing the narratives in universities. Cleaning the departments of the government from those who are on the left. Select people who are on the right for positions. And we have seen this really being implemented in the last 10 months. We have seen threats to the universities. I mean, can you imagine, the government is asking the universities, you need to give space for the people on the right to have presentation and to have themselves and give them the forum and give them the ability to have influence. The government is asking the universities in America. This is not the America that people know in this regard. And to either, to go further and push this agenda, this Heritage Foundation, which is very, very, very influential in what's happening now, they came up with this Esther project. What's this? Basically, the government need to use all tools to stop the demonstration at the universities, to change the narrative at the universities, under the pretext of fighting anti-Semitism. Now, this is the Heritage Foundation. They want to fight anti-Semitism, so they form a task force, and some of the Zionists and some of those moderate Jews and beyond, they became part of this Esther project. Now, guess what? Some of the wise Jews, not those extreme Zionists who thought this is the opportunity. Some of the wise Jews said publicly and wrote, saying, this is not a project to fight anti-Semitism. This is a project to use the fight against anti-Semitism to control the universities and to change the direction of education in this country. And they were right, absolutely right. Now this week, this thing came into the open. So what happened? So as we said, Tucker Carlson, he had been speaking in a language that is very, very uncomfortable to any Zionists in America and even to many of the Jews in this regard. Exposing the Zionists and what the Israel is doing, and they are trying to use the U.S. and they want the U.S. to do the wars for them, the U.S. to fight for them. They keep taking money from the U.S. and so on and so forth. I mean, this is an influential guy who used to be on Fox News. Things came to the open when he invited somebody by the name of Nick Fuentes. This guy is 27-year-old, but very influential among the extreme right. He is clearly anti-Semitic, and he does not hide it. He's anti-black, he does not hide it, and anti-this and anti-that. In fact, he thinks the less of the blacks in this country and Jews, we're going to have the white people, we're going to have paradise in this country. I mean, he speaks like this. You just, need to listen to him. So the breaking point came, this guy was kicked out of Twitter, was kicked out of YouTube, was kicked out of Facebook, was kicked out of all these things. In May, he was brought back by Elon Musk to X, which is the former Twitter platform. And he kept going on the same. He just listened to one of his speeches, and you would recognize that this is somebody who's really need help because of the hate that's there. So what came to happen about 10 days ago or so, Tucker Carlson invited him for a 2-hour session, meaning give him a platform where 5 million people watch it. Now he have more than 1 million people who are following him. And of course, you could imagine what was discussed. I saw some parts of it, not the whole thing of the 2 hours. Now, as a result, there was an attack on Tucker Carlson, there was an attack on Fuentes and this and that. So the head of the Heritage Foundation, now this is the head of the organization that came with Project 2025, which is being implemented, and the head of the organization that came up with the Esther Project, he came and defended Carlson. He said, he's my friend, he's one of the people that we always invite him here. We would not accept, people siding him on the side or this and that. And he talked about the globalized class. Really an attack on Jewish Zionists, people who have money and who have influence on policy or try to affect policy in this regard. As a result, 2 of the Jews on that commission resigned. And they put it bluntly that, no, you are having a platform now against this is anti-Semitic, you are giving the platform and this and that. So the head of the Heritage Foundation, he said, even if you want us, we should not cancel him, get him to debate him and talk about him. Of course, this outrage, eventually he took a little of it back. But the damage was already happening. There's this guy who's a congressman who put $1 million to establish clubs for this organization that Kirk have established, the one who was killed 2 months ago or so, Turning America. So he want to establish clubs in the high schools that push for that agenda on the right. Mariam Ederson, who was the wife of this guy who died, who used to be owning so many of those gambling places, now is putting $20 million to defeat a Republican congressman because he is asking to not give this amount of money support to Israel. So there is, this reality pertaining to the Zionists and their influence in the U.S. And all the signs indicate that the government is on board because the government is silent on Tucker Carlson, on Fuentes, and on what's going on with the rumors of who killed Charlie Kirk. Remember, Charlie Kirk wrote a letter to Netanyahu about the image of Israel in this country, and we know that the Zionists have threatened him to cut the funding if he not disassociate himself from Tucker Carlson and Green. And he refused, and they took their money that they were supposed to sponsor him. So if you go to the people on the right and see their social media, I mean, it's clear accusation that the Israelis have killed this guy. I do not really believe that. But that's what is there out. And an attack, on this regard. As for the changing landscape, as I said, the universities now, we have seen a drastic decrease in demonstration. We have seen professors being fired. We have seen Department of War firing generals and top people in the army. We have seen, even early on, letters went to the CIA and the FBI agents saying, quit your job or we're going to fire you anyway. I mean, all of this is unheard of in this country and in its history. We have seen threats to put the army on the street. We already have the National Guard on the streets in few states, quote unquote, to fight crime. I mean, even the president said that they will be trained in the cities. I mean, all along the army base is not in the states. Yeah, they have their bases, but not on the streets. I mean, all those changes really showed that there is this agenda that came with the 2025 project by the Heritage Foundation, and the people who came from the Heritage Foundation, they are on the top of applying this. And what will make the life of those Zionists and their supporters miserable is that J.D. Vance is more on this than President Trump. I mean, you have seen him and his statements in Tel Aviv, calling this decision by the subcommittee and the Knesset stupid, and saying publicly that he was offended by their action. This is in Tel Aviv. So there is no doubt that, they would prefer Trump rather than dealing with J.D. Vance in this regard. Now, where this thing is heading, it gets to the point that the government wrote to some universities that they're going to give them advantages, money and grants and so on and so forth, if they go through certain requirements. And the university basically said no. Because it was an attempt, just like in our countries, where we come from, where the government have total control on the university and the education in this regard. I mean, this thing was not that the previous government did not have an effect on policies like education. I mean, we have seen the Biden administration pushing the agenda of the people of Qawm Lut, in schools and beyond. I mean, we have seen companies celebrating, the month of June, Pride Month. Now, this year, June, did you hear any major companies sponsoring or celebrating or this and that? Absolutely not, because they know there's a price that they will pay for it. It's also in the open that President, his children, they are making big money. And, there are people shouting, conflict of interest, but who cares? We have seen the government being shut for 40 days. Did you see any people in the streets calling for the government to work together and do things? 40 days the government shut down in America. And it's as if the people became, not lethargic. They no longer even, respond, waiting for some kind of wahy revelation to solve this issue. I mean, this is not the America that we know. Now, what's the implication on every sector of the society? That's a subject by itself, but let's just at this point, since we discussed to a certain extent the effect on anti-Semitism and this and this and that. For the Muslims, we have also seen changes in this regard. I mean, many of us and many of the intellectuals and this and that in this country were shocked that the government would arrest Sami Hamdi for what? I mean, free speech. This Sami Hamdi was going on a tour giving talks. And what's really interesting is the one who announced the arrest of Sami Hamdi is Lomar. This lady, they said she has the ear of the President Trump. that she said that the home, the ICE people who arrested him, somehow she got the news from them. Homeland Security people informed her, we arrested Sami Hamdi. Why? She has no position. But this just tells you that now the government and the right and the Defense Department and the rest is somehow working together. Anyway, I think for the sake of time, let me just say a few things about what's happening in Gaza, because this topic is a big, and we have to keep watching and trying to understand, because this thing would make an effect on us down the road. We still did not see, implication in this regard. On the contrary, we have seen 139 Muslims getting elected to offices in the last election. So at this point, the right is busy with the anti-Semitism and those Zionists and their influence in the US. But for how long and when there will be some attention coming toward the Muslim community remain to be seen in this regard. So shifting back to our old issue of Gaza that we have been discussing since October 7, things are still the same to a certain extent. Still the Zionists are trying to break the ceasefire, finding excuses. It's not working. In fact, tomorrow, which is now Monday in Palestine, Witkoff and Kushner are going to be there. And again, it is to get Netanyahu to move with a stick. Because now there's an issue. You see, any small issue become a big issue to those Zionists. So they are occupying Rafah. They moved from certain places, but they occupy this Rafah, which is in the border with Egypt. If you remember a few or 2 weeks or so again, I think it was 2 weeks, two and a half weeks, the Israelis said that 2 of their soldiers, one is a captain, one is a soldier, were killed in Rafah. And they accused Hamas of doing it. There were conflicting reports of what had happened. Hamas did not issue a statement. Now the Wall Street Journal is saying that the Israeli army discovered a tunnel. And they wanted to go into the tunnel, and there were some fighters in the tunnel. They fired at them and they killed 2 soldiers. And the Israelis, after that, as you know, they killed 100 people from the air. So Israel is saying now there are few hundred fighters underground in Rafah where the Israeli army is occupying the city. And Israel said they either come and surrender to us, or we're gonna put concrete and bury them underground, or along this line of thinking and threats. Egypt tried to come with a compromise, saying, why don't you allow them to come out and go to other places on the condition that they will surrender their weapons and they will tell you where are the tunnels in Rafah. It did not fly. But there was a soldier who was missing since 2014. And the Israelis consider this, as a government and the army, very important to recover his remains if he's dead. Now, Hamas never said that he was dead or alive. And what happened is, toward the end of the war in 2014, this guy was captured by Hamas and dragged into a tunnel. The Israeli army have something called the Hannibal Doctrine. What's Hannibal Doctrine? If one of the army, 2 or whatever, will be taken as hostages by Hamas or Islamic Jihad or any other, they said, kill him. The Israeli army will kill him or kill her so that they will not be bargaining chips. And toward the end of the 2014, this guy was caught, dragged to one of those tunnels, and at that point, the Israeli army put so much, weapons and attacks and on that they said hundreds of people as a result die from that attack, including that soldier. Now, after the fact, they said the Hamas that he was killed in that by the Israelis, not by the Hamasis. So Hamas said, okay, we're going to return him. Now the US is pressuring the Israelis, let those people go through in Red Cross cars, and we do not want to break the ceasefire. And they are pressuring the Israelis to do it. That's one of the objectives that will be done by Witkoff and Kushner tomorrow in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in this regard. Because Hamas did return this body. And this, I said, this guy is from the 2014. He has nothing to do with the October 7 in this regard. And he's one of the relatives of the high ranking people in the army, before. So basically, he's something, if you read the Israeli media today, they have highlights of him in the top of the news. Although, there are so many people that they get back, they were not really major news back there. Turkey, on Friday, have issued an indictment and call for arrest of, some of the top officials in Israel, including Netanyahu, including the Zamir, the head of the army chief of staff, including Ibn Gfir, including the defense minister Katz, and 32 others. The US wants Turkey to be part of the solution in Gaza, thinking that if Turkey would go for it, the other Muslim countries will follow. Now, the US have submitted, and we'll close with this, inshallah, the US have submitted a draft resolution to the Security Council last Thursday on this future of Gaza. Because there are two different ways that they're going to proceed with supposedly phase 2. The Israelis want the decision makers to be this new body that will be run by President Trump and some other Muslims and non-Muslims, officials. That's what the Israelis want. The Turkey and others, they said no. This should be a UN mandate. That this should come from the UN Security Council, and this will go to the, with the authority of the Security Council. And the Israelis, of course, do not want that. Because that's not something that, they think will be in their favor. So this is really what's standing now between the different parties and going to the second phase. Who will have the control? Is it Trump, Blair, and some Muslims who supposedly will be in the decision makers, although basically it will not be non-Muslims who are making the major decision, or it's going to be a UN resolution. I should say a resolution that comes from Majlis al-Amn, not from the General Assembly, from the Security Council. And that's where the difference is, and that's a remaining big point in this regard. Other issues can be solved after that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring the khair and the good for the ummah and bring the hidayah for the rest of the humanity. Allahumma ameen. We have time, inshallah, for one question or one comment before we end.